Columbus has always had a rich African-American history. From the late 1800s to present day, we've always been on the move. It's as if every street has a story to tell. And our very own community historian, Rita Fuller-Yates, is here to tell it.
Go, girl, do your thing. Go, girl.
That's right. Your homegirl's on the scene. She's out here uncovering the facts and sharing the history in the streets. Let's go.
Hello, hello. Thank you for joining us for another episode of History in the Streets. Hey, Devontae. Hey, Vita. Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited for you. Hope we do your family well. Thank you, Charlie Davis, for joining us. If you guys could please tag and share, I'd really appreciate that. And even if you could start a watch party, that would be nice. I'm going to wait a couple of seconds so that you guys get some time. As you can see, I'm in the car. So I still want to get our history lesson in for the week. So I thought it was important for us to still share our story, but I'm going to do it in a unique way and do it from the car. So thank you again for joining me. Hey, Laura Davis Perry, thank you for joining me. Okay, we have a long show today, and I don't want you guys to miss any of this historical information. We do the show every Friday at 1 o'clock. We do this not only so that you can know your local history, and not only that you learn about being an African American growing up in Columbus, but we do this because during Corona, your children are home. And this is a good time to get that history lesson in for the week. So I share the history lesson with you guys and the stories with you. And then maybe one day next week, in the earlier part of the week, you can get in the car and take your children on a little road trip, which can be 2 days of history a week, which actually is probably more than they're getting in school. So I love to do this stuff, but I want to make sure it's effective. And you guys have to do it along with me, okay? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Now, we are standing. I wish I was standing. I am sitting in my car in the middle of a field that is well known. Normally, during this time of the year, there's registration happening for Little League football. And we're here on the Hilltop of Columbus, better known as the suburb of the West Side, is what I've been told over the years. But we're going to talk about the history of the Hilltop. I'm very biased because I grew up on the east side of Columbus, and much of the African American history was started on the east side. But there were many communities that helped contribute to the conversation of the African American experience, and the Hilltop was definitely one of them. Now, we don't want to miss any of the details of the history regarding the Hilltop. It did start with Lucas Sullivan and his family, but I want to make sure you get all of the details. The name of the Hilltop derives from Lucas Sullivan, who was the first deeded landowner for what was then called Sullivan's Hill. Although the original inhabitants of the hill were Native Americans, the land was always vital, for it served as a fort against enemies. Before the turn of the 20th century, the Hilltop area became home to the Columbus State Hospital for the Insane, built in 1870. Prior to this, the Lunatic Asylum, as it was named, was located on Jefferson Avenue on the Near East Side. As the hospital expanded, it afforded opportunities to African Americans. African American families began owning large parcels of land that were used for farming and other entrepreneurial endeavors during that time. During the early 1900s, African American communities emerged on a two-street section of the Hilltop, Wheatland and Oakley Avenues.
And when the Hilltop, at that time, everybody knew everybody. My pastor lived down the street on Oakley. We had lawyers that lived in there. We had doctors. We had police officers.
These communities would grow as professional blacks would purchase the inexpensive lots.
When the first families moved up to the Hilltop there, you didn't buy a house, you bought lots. And you build your house from lots, and a lot of, most of the people would buy 2 or 3 lots. My grandmother had 6 sons. She had 11 kids, but she had 6 sons, so she bought a lot for each son.
We grew up in a house. We bought a house. My mother and father bought a house, built a house actually on Oakley. We still own the house on Oakley. So the 3 brothers stayed in one room, and my sister had her own room, and my mother and father had their room. So it was a very small house. Now that I look at it now compared to when I was growing up, I didn't think it was small, but very close-knit household.
Pretty good history, right? So the Hilltop has a legacy for the African American community. Here's a couple of history facts that I think is important regarding the Hilltop of Columbus. Arthur Boak was the first African American in 1797 to be born on the west side of Columbus, which was actually Franklinton. As the video had mentioned, Franklinton was the first suburb or the first town, and then the Hilltop was somewhat of a suburb, and it was given to his sons. Also, the African Americans helped develop the Hilltop of Columbus, as the video had mentioned. And we want to constantly have these conversations because when I was growing up, the Hilltop, I didn't know the history of the Hilltop, for starters. Secondly, it seemed like it was far away from town. And last but not least, it appeared to be a close-knit community that they only knew about themselves. And this is where this conversation is so important in having, because I had no idea of the wonderful, rich history that happened in the community of the Hilltop. But along with that, we have to keep in mind the insane asylum gave opportunities to the African Americans unlike any other company at the time. That allowed for Black people to not only build communities up here, but to begin to build families. They began buying lots, as Mr. Potts had mentioned, and that established these communities that we know today. Now, it took leaders to begin these communities, and it took visionaries to begin thinking about what the communities needed. The next individual that I want to talk about is Carl Fulton. Carl Fulton is a little personal to my heart, only because I've heard about all of his fabulousness through his daughter, who is a friend of mine, Vita Fulton Williams. Actually got to see her father impact our community. I don't want to miss any of the details regarding Carl. So I have less than a 2-minute video that you guys are going to watch so that you can learn more about Carl Fulton, who actually was a resident of the West Side at 321 South Wheatland. But we don't want to miss any of these details regarding this great visionary. So I'll meet you back here in a couple of minutes. In the beginning of the organization that is behind today's Pee Wee football game began in the late 1950s, when a West Sider, Carl J. Fulton, Dennis McDonald, and other West Side Columbus sports enthusiasts helped to found the Westgate Hawks.
My favorite memory of a Pony League game really was not the Pony League. It was the Westgate Hawks, which was like the senior team, because that was the team that my dad was coaching. And I was actually a mascot on the cheerleader team. And I remember one game, I was young, so I wasn't really paying that much attention to the game, but I knew I was doing my cheers because that's what I was supposed to be doing.
The Lions Club helped with the financial support, and the program grew until 1960. This was when the Hawks decided to broaden their football program to include several 12-year-old teams. This was the beginning of the Pony League feeder system. Slowly over the next 3 years, more teams were added until it became necessary to make the support of each pony team a community affair.
The Westgate Hawks was a football team that they claimed a national claim because they were winning all kinds of championships. And it ended up that Carl Fulton, they named a league after Carl Fulton there and everything there when he came to the Hilltop.
The 6 teams of the 1971 Pony League were the Benz Bengals, the Brookshire Cowboys, the Georgian Heights Packers, the Holly Hill Eagles, the River Bend Raiders, and the Valley View Vikings. Thank you again, Carl Fulton, for your vision to help our children grow. So it's pretty cool, right? Seeing all of the evolution of the Pee Wee League. This has been going on for over 60 years. And it was Carl Fulton who started the vision along with several other players, key players, who wanted more for our children, who wanted more to see us being involved in the community, but also having something else to do in the summertime to keep us out of trouble. I think that is huge. I thank Vita for sharing her story about her father with me because I had no idea. He started the visionary for what we know now as Little League football. As Mr. Potts had mentioned, Little League football when we were growing up was somewhat like a professional experience for many families. I know personally, my brother played football. My daughter was a cheerleader for a Little League. I was a cheerleader for a Little League, Mount Vernon Plaza. I also coached for the Eastland Vikings as a cheerleading coach. And my son played for Westerville and Gahanna. So after Carl Fulton had the courage to start this vision, it really evolved into many experiences for a lot of children here in Columbus, Ohio. And I thank you, Vita, as well as the legacy of the Carl Fulton family. Thank you again. You know, we're all about making sure we provide legacy. We talk about legacy. Why do we talk about legacy? I talk about legacy because I know we understand what it means. But being an African American, it's difficult to create legacy because of how our legacy began. But it's never too late to start legacy. And that's why I talk about it. I think it's huge to create it because we need it. The Potts family, who was some of the representatives that spoke for us today, actually is an example of legacy. They started in Columbus, Ohio, one of the first African American families to settle here. And Byron Potts, as we know, as attorney Byron Potts, many of us have used his services, and we're grateful for his intelligence and his services for over 30 years here in Columbus, Ohio. But the Potts family started here on the Hilltop. The mother of the Byron Potts lived on the east side of Columbus. Woohoo! But his reign ended on the hilltop of Columbus. And we have a little short clip about the legacy of the Potts family that I think you guys definitely want to learn about. If you don't much know about Byron Potts, now you know. I'll see you guys back here in a couple of minutes. Byron Potts' grandmother was one of the first black families to purchase land and move to the hilltop of Columbus in the turn of the century. Mama Bertha had 11 children and purchased 6 lots on the hilltop of Columbus for each one of her sons to live. Byron Potts was born in Columbus, Ohio in 1956 from Cheryl and Coughlin Potts. Cheryl was a hard disciplinarian who'd worked for the state of Ohio, and his father, Coughlin, was a highly intelligent man. Byron graduated from West High School in 1974, where he was preparing himself for politics. His uncle, Earl Potts, who happens to be a historian for the hilltop of Columbus, said he always thought Byron would become the mayor because everyone seemed to like him. Currently, Byron Potts is not only a tenured attorney for the past 30 years, but his niece, Nicole Madison, continues the law reign and serves as an attorney for the state of Ohio. The Potts family values are perfect examples of legacy and what it means to teach the next generation.
The thing that I noticed was the legacy of service. I always saw my grandfather in the community. Everyone knew him. He was involved in all of the different organizations or whatever was going on in the community. So I think that was something that I always noticed, and I always sort of strived to emulate that. So I've always been someone, ever since high school, I was always involved in some type of community service. And I think that was one of the big things that I really got from my grandfather and really saw that growing up.
Their childhood home, located at 244 South Oakley Avenue, still remains in the family to this very day.
I think my greatest accomplishment is accepting Jesus Christ. I got all these accolades. I got 3 degrees and doctorate degree and all that. It doesn't mean anything.
Full story, right? Now you know why it is that we talk about legacy, because it normally starts somewhere, and sometimes we forget those humble beginnings. Byron Potts' grandmother was a legend within herself by buying plots of land to ensure the sons had a future. And I think that was huge from someone in the late 1800s to have that vision. Thanks again to the Potts family for sharing your legacy with us and standing still for the African American community. Thank you again. I personally want to make sure that I tell a little story. I don't really have much of a story, but I want to acknowledge Miss Boone, Coach Boone. She was my coach at Mount Vernon Plaza, and she was the mother of Vanetta, and Margaret Boone. And actually, she wasn't a cheerleader coach by experience. She became a mother cheerleading coach, all because her daughters wanted to cheer. She created the organization we cheered for was the Mount Vernon Plaza. But I remember her putting the t-shirts together and us going to Kmart and getting our uniforms. It was a humble experience, but I thank people like Miss Boone, because she didn't have to volunteer to help a little girl like me. Thank you. I have a few other coaches that I want to thank. I didn't write down every name, but I did make a post earlier this week asking to acknowledge those coaches that have basically stopped to volunteer to help our kids. And a few of those that I just knew from growing up was Frank Demme. He is the father of Jawan, Demi, who has been a part of the movement for many of years. Thank you, Mr. Demi, for your vision and your tenacity for building up young men. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Another one was Irvin Hill, who was a coach for the Eastland Vikings for many of years, passionate about helping young men develop. From my understanding, they had professional football players come out of these programs. So again, when Carl Fulton visualized this, I don't know if he knew what was going to come out of this. But again, thank you for the vision, and thank you for the tenacity to continue the charge. And last but not least, I want to thank a few of the coaches that continue to work in the mission. I know for sure Todd Claiborne. He's an amazing mentor, author. He may see I'm putting it in the atmosphere. Todd, you may become an author one day. But he's an excellent teacher and a mentor for young people, as well as a coach. And he does, referees. So again, those type of people: Leroy Thornton, Angelo Byers, Ziggy Marshall, David Scott, just to name a few. I ask these questions because as our community grows, we need to stop and recognize everyday people. It's not, Tyler Perry. As much as I love all of these people, Oprah Winfrey, I love Denzel Washington. All of these people add value to our life every day. But honestly, it's the Frank Demis that really make an impact on our life every day. So our show is recognizing, and we're stopping and acknowledging the Carl Fultons who started the Pony League. We're stopping and recognizing Earl Potts' legacy. And we're making sure you know how valuable everyday people are for our lives every day. Okay? I want you guys to spread the good news about this show. I want you guys to spread the information with your children. Get in the car and take a trip around the city and spread the good news about history in the streets. Because as the community grows, this information will be less and less available. So that's why we need this show, History in the Streets. But we also need for you guys to share. We need you guys to start watch parties. And when you need you guys to tag people who you know has been mentioned in the show or loves history. Again, we don't do any of this in vain. Everything we do is to help you grow and to help you know, so that you can become better every day.
Columbus has always had a rich African-American history. From the late 1800s to present day, we've always been on the move. It's as if every street has a story to tell. And our very own community historian, Rita Fuller-Yates, is here to tell it.
Go, girl, just do your thing. Go, girl.
That's right, your homegirl's on the scene. She's out here uncovering the facts and sharing the history in the streets. Let's go.